Morning, everyone. We're going to get started and hopefully we'll get some additional participants. I'm Maureen Andrade and I'm the interim director for the Women in Business Impact Lab. And there's some information on your tables about the Women in Business Impact Lab and some social media information if you want to learn more about us. But essentially, we are a research team, and we have several of our members here this morning. And our goal is to work with organizations in the community and help them be more effective, and specifically to advance women in business. So we sponsor events like this. We have a LinkedIn page where we post results of our research, tools, and resources that organizations can use. So we would invite you to access those. And we also have a QR code for our next speaker coming up next month. And I think at the last handout in your little packet there at the tables is a survey. It's just 4 questions, but you might want to take it home and do it. And the purpose is to gather more information about how we can partner with you to help you in your organizations and in your workplace. So this morning we have Sui Lang Panoke, and let me tell you a little bit about her. She's the founder and chief creative officer of Rethink International. And that's a global social enterprise and strategic consulting firm. And it's designed to challenge people to rethink how and what they think. So that's going to be fascinating. She's worked with thousands of leaders and organizations around the world, leading in politics, business, government, nonprofits, and the media on rethinking their approaches to leadership, advancement, strategy, culture, community, branding, communications, creativity, and innovation. So she was most recently Senior Vice President of Culture at Zions Bank from 2020 to 2024. And in that position, she directed the bank's strategic vision to foster a culture of community. And I think as she speaks to us today on strategies for impact, we'll learn more about that culture of community. She holds a BS in political science from the University of Utah's Hinckley Institute of Politics, an MPA from American University with a certificate in women policy and political leadership. And she was awarded the Outstanding Leadership Award from the Women in Politics Institute, Pathfinder Award from the Salt Lake Chamber, and was recently named one of Utah's 40 over 40 in 2024. She serves on a number of different boards and community organizations. I won't go into detail on those, but we're very, very excited to welcome Sui to speak to us this morning. Thank you.
Aloha. Thank you so much, Maureen, for that warm welcome. And thank you all of you for joining us this morning. Let's hear it from morning people. I'm one of those. I know it's bright and early this morning, so thank you so much for starting your day with me. It is an honor to be here and share some of my thoughts and insights around strategies for impact this morning. I also want to note I just arrived back from the beautiful islands of Hawaii yesterday. So I'm sharing some of my native Hawaiian culture with all of you here at UVU, wearing my flip-flops this morning. And they're very comfortable. And I don't know if many of you have been to the ocean. The waves there can kind of humble you sometimes. And I got thrashed by some rocks and one of the ocean waves that hit me the other day. And so one of my feet is swollen. And so the most comfortable shoes for me to wear today were my flip-flops. So I appreciate your flexibility. with that. So there are a number of things that we are going to address this morning. And I love these small kind of intimate groups. We're going to go a little bit deeper than I generally do with the first engagement. And so I'll encourage all of you, and I understand there are a lot of education leaders here. And so I'm just making this kind of natural assumption that you all are cerebral and deep thinkers and are interested in not just deep thinking, but rethinking certain concepts, practices, and strategies that you can take back to your teams and your organizations and ultimately the communities that we all serve together. So I'm going to start out with just a little bit about me. As Maureen mentioned, my name's Sui Lang Panoke. So my first name, it's 2 words, 1 name. Originally from the beautiful islands of Hawaii, but I was raised here in Salt Lake City, Utah. I studied political science at the University of Utah and then moved back east to Washington, D.C. for grad school, where I studied at American University. They have a Women in Politics Institute there. So I did their MPA program, lived on Capitol Hill for about 13 years, doing this work that I describe as diversifying political leadership and democratizing the media landscape. So getting more women, people of color, elected to public office, and then amplifying their voices, stories, perspectives on public policy issues in the local and mainstream media. So that's the work that I have done. So I'll start there with education. So my background is really in politics. And I early on kind of recognized the value and the impact and influence that leaders can have in the public policy arena. So that's what started off my career. And then in business, over time, I started working with local, national, and global organizations and supporting their culture efforts. And so a lot of my background is also rooted in culture strategy, developing strategies on how to create cultures of community within your organizations and the communities that we serve. And then ultimately, when I moved back to Utah about 7 years ago, I did a lot of kind of corporate training here across the Beehive State, and then ultimately ended up at Zions Bank. And so I'm fairly new to the banking industry, but I'll also say probably the most meaningful and impactful work that I've done in areas of equality, opportunity, and access was done through this community bank. It was a very powerful institution. And I think together, my colleagues at Zions and community partners were able to have a very deep impact in the communities that we serve. So my hope is to share some of those experiences and perspectives with you. I also want to note the one kind of culminating theme that aligned with all of those different areas of experience throughout my career was relationship building. Now, I really want you all to kind of think deeply around how you approach relationship building and how meaningful that skill set is to growing your organization, growing your business, and having an impact in the areas in which you are pursuing your career. So also, when I was at Zions, our tagline there was building economic inclusion. And the tagline was building economic inclusion by opening opportunity, increasing access, and investing our capital. Now, when we talked about capital, we described it in 3 forms. We've got human capital, our people; social capital, which is the trust and relationships that you build amongst your teams, with your clients, and ultimately in the communities that you serve; and thirdly, financial capital, your monetary investments. So it's important to note that social capital is the bridge between human capital and financial capital, right? Your economic bottom line. And we'll talk a little bit deeper about that. And then thirdly, I wanted to address the concept of bridge building. So as I have stepped out on my own into the entrepreneurial space, I've been thinking about what value can I offer to the community. And it stems from this concept of bridge building, going to the margins in working your way in. So I'm excited to share a little bit more about that concept and how that can help all of you in developing effective impact strategies in the organizations that you lead. Now, during my time at Zions, this may sound however it's going to sound, but banking inspired poetry. So I want to share a poem that I wrote inspired by the banking industry with all of you and just kind of see your thoughts. Like, what do you think about this? So I want you to just kind of sit back, set aside all of the responsibilities, the tasks that you have for today. And I want you to just listen and absorb this creative body of work. So I can describe it that way. And I titled it, I Am Money. How many of you, your work involves money? Yeah, I mean, money is something that we all need, something that we all use. And I also want you to think about the relationship that you have with money. Okay, here goes. In the beginning, God created comedy. And somewhere in his creative journey, he also created irony, which today I define as me standing here talking to you about money. I'm very green when it comes to money. And when I say green, I mean rookie in the money industry. I don't necessarily identify as a banker, but somehow I found myself working at a bank. I don't necessarily identify as a poet, but somehow poetry has become part of my creative process. I do, however, identify as a creative. And every day I stand all amazed at the circles I find myself in. For someone who studied political science to now leading conversations in banking and finance, now that's what I call ironic, because I failed economics. My passion has always been to pursue a career in politics. So where I sit today, I call God's greatest comedic remix. So if God created comedy, he also created money, because money is what brought us all here to today's convening. Isn't it funny how money somehow works its way into everything? Regardless of God's intentions, I move forward with limited comprehension of all this talk around deposits, assets, capital markets, venture capital investments, Series A, B, C, D, E, F, G funding. A lot of this is still a foreign concept to me. Full transparency, I still find myself Googling financial terms in our executive management committee meetings. Despite the fact that I'm still learning all there is to know in the banking and financial services industry, there is a silver lining. And that is knowing that we are in the business of relationship building. And that is a skill I learned on Capitol Hill. Human capital, social capital, financial capital. I may not be the go-to person on how to invest your money, but I don't need to be, because I can rely on the experience of my colleagues. Rather than compete with their area of expertise, we explore ways in which our strengths can be complementary. That strategy speaks to the value of diversity. My strength is knowing how to invest in people and communities. That is the value that I bring to any table which I may be sitting. And in 2024, human capital and social capital is much more than just a thing. Some would argue it is everything, because any industry without trust between its institutions and community runs the risk of facing the same fate as Signature and SVB. One thing I've learned building my career in banking is that if we define money as opportunity and learn how to use it properly, we can maximize our ability to feed our seed of creativity. If we define money as creativity, its power lies in its divinity. And that would mean that I am money and money is me. If I am money and money is me, that means that I am opportunity. And I have the power to monetize my pure potentiality. If I am money and money is me, that means the source of my wealth is sitting in my library. Do any of you remember that green book called The Giving Tree? I brought it with me here today. A young boy I love that book, not just because it was green, but because the message really resonated with me. It essentially outlined the formula for us all to be happy. A young boy develops a relationship with a tree. And at one point, he says to the tree, "I want some money. Can you give me some money?" The tree generously replies, "I have only leaves and apples. Take my apples, boy, and sell them in the city. Then you will have money and you will be happy." In the end, that boy milked that tree dry. Why doesn't anyone ever talk about that? The tree would give, and the boy would take, and the tree still found happiness in playing a small part in that boy's joy. I don't know about all of you, but that tree is better than me. Can someone please explain to me how all that giving benefited the tree? Did the tree ever ask itself, what's in it for me? Or is that just my natural human instincts? After hours of pondering, I now see the connection between the tree and money. As much as I want to say, forget that boy, find a friend who is going to give you reciprocity. Invest in a relationship where you can at least build some equity, where the opportunity for liquidity is timely and you don't have to sell all your leaves and apples for the price of someone else's happiness. Every day I aspire to be more like that tree because that tree's identity is rooted in giving. And giving is the secret to building a healthy relationship with money. I guess money really can grow on trees if their roots are nourished by the art of giving. As we embark upon our own personal journeys to strengthen our relationship with money, may we each know that in order for us to be happy, we must find joy in the simplicity of simply being. I invite you now to repeat after me. I am money, and money is me. Thank you. So I invite you to turn to a partner at your tables and share one thing that resonated with you. So the topic of money is an interesting one, right? I kind of put it in the category of like religion and politics. Like generally, we kind of run away from talking about it, and more so in corporate cultures, nonprofit cultures, right? In the workplace, politics, religion, money, we're not talking about that. So I'm dying to hear what may have resonated with you in terms of my reflections on my relationship with money. What came up for some of you? Yes, Noah.
You just mentioned money is opportunity, and if we don't talk about it, we're not sharing opportunities. We're not allowing others to have that opportunity. One really concrete thing that I think about more and more lately is I want to tell my students the opportunities they can get in terms of actual salary numbers. Here's what happens if you do this. Here's what happens if you do this. Here's what happens if you do this. I'm not making a value judgment about that. But I don't think we do a good job because we run away from talking about salary. It's taboo. Some of the firms I worked for, it was explicitly forbidden to talk about your salary with your coworkers, which I think results in a lot of inequity in pay across genders and other dimensions, and also just an inability to realize what can I do and where's the opportunity, where can I get it? I think we need to talk about it.
That's right. Yes. Wow, you're speaking my language, Noah. And, can you imagine a world?
Probably was, but as a first year staff accountant, I didn't speak up about it and didn't say it. But yes, I'm pretty sure you can't do that.
And of course, Noah works in kind of the money industry, numbers, accounting, all of that. He's a finance guy. But imagine a world where all of our salaries were transparent. Right? Is that a common question you'd ask a colleague? So how much are you making? No, absolutely not. Well, it depends how much you're making, right? Can oftentimes determine how comfortable you are talking about salary and compensation and monetary incentives, right? Other thoughts that came up for you? Yes.
We thought it was just an interesting practice to repeat what you asked us to. That was something we both thought, hadn't been done before. And then just at the root of building a healthy relationship with money is the giving principle. And recognizing there are levers and develop a relationship, just like with any other relationship in life.
Exactly. Oftentimes our perception of money or a relationship with it is how can we receive it, right? How can we earn more money? How can we get more money, right? Versus who can we give to? Who needs money, right? We may have a limited amount of funds or money in the bank, but what am I doing with that? How am I serving as a steward of this capital to invest in other people, to invest in businesses, to invest in the community? So a little twist on that. Any other final thoughts on your relationship with money? Yes, Brenda.
It's interesting how money can change other people's perspective of you. So if you come into some money, all of a sudden you have all kinds of new friends.
I have seen that happen. Yeah. Yes. All of a sudden you're getting like headlines and front page covers on Forbes magazine.
So it's like, you start to wonder who's real.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
who's in it for real. And so that's, I find that, you know, when you have money, there are so many people in Utah who have a ton of money, and I get asked all the time, could you sponsor this? Could you pay for that? Could you, endow us with this? I think that must be exhausting and exhilarating at the same
Yeah.
time, because you have it to give.
Mm-hmm.
And if you like giving, then it's really cool. But I don't know, I just think having money sometimes could be exhausting.
Challenging as well. So kind of exploring the your relationship with money and identity. What does the amount of money that you have at any given moment say about who you are? Also the value that you bring to whatever table you may be sitting at, right? So really thinking about that thoughtfully. So today we're going to rethink culture, the culture that surrounds the work that we all do, the culture that surrounds the money that we make, and the culture that surrounds the people that we engage with, the connections that we make, and how we develop ourselves as leaders. So I'm going to throw some more thoughts at you. So rethink culture. Now, strategy is the vision for human behavior. Culture is the reality of human behavior. Community is loving and accepting humans despite their behavior. That's the safety and acceptance piece. And fourthly, impact is alignment between strategy, culture, and community. Now, I want you to sit with these thoughts for a moment. Also want to note there are handouts that Celestial printed out where you can take notes from today's conversation. So any thoughts that come to you, are these kind of new definitions for these different elements in the work that we do? Is it resonating? Do these definitions make sense? Yes, Brenda.
I think your definition of community is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a new take on the word community. So
Yes.
I will be excited to hear you explain that.
Great. Well, I invite you all to think about what your community, who do you consider to be your community and why? Right? Do they make you feel accepted? Does this community make you feel safe? Right? Is it a geographical boundary that determines your community? Or is it more of a personal connection between people that defines and determines your community? So I throw that back to all of you to kind of think thoughtfully around that particular definition. Now, let me put this into context. So I know it's a small image up there, but how many of you have ever driven a car or been driven in a car? Yeah, pretty much everyone here in the room. You probably came here today in a car. How many of you have driven, now let's be honest here, 60 miles an hour in a 55 mile an hour zone? Okay. And if your name is not up, I'm going to have a hard time believing that you're telling the truth, right? And how often do we really know how fast we're going at every given moment? right? So I'm going to apply this definition of culture being the reality of human behavior to the example of speeding. Okay, we've all done it. So now the strategy is the hope, right? Inspired by policy. So a bunch of legislators got together and they're like, okay, let's set the speed limit at 55 miles an hour. And that will create safer highways, right? That's the hope for human behavior. The culture is the reality, which is informed by the majority, right? In actuality, generally drivers drive between 55 to 65 miles an hour, fast enough to test the boundaries of their limits, yet reasonably enough to stay under the radar, right? And in my mind, I've always thought, okay, if you go within 10 over, like you're good. You know what I mean? Right? You're not gonna get pulled over. That's the reality of the behavior. Community, that's the love and acceptance piece, informed by the authorities. A police officer will offer a warning to a young driver who is new to the area. He'll educate them on why abiding by these rules is important and what the consequences will be next time, right? So offering grace along with information, education when these rules are being tested. That's community, right? We're supporting you. We know you're not perfect, but we're here to help you, right? Keep our highways safe. And then the impact, that's the alignment between strategy, culture, and community through setting reasonable expectations, creating a culture where the majority of drivers are willing to uphold the law within reason, offering grace and education when needed. We create safety and security in our communities. You see how all of that works together. And that's impact. When the culture, community, and impact pieces are working together, they complement one another, and together they ultimately achieve the desired goal or outcome. Yeah? So that's culture. Now, bridge building defined. Now, this is a beautiful picture of the largest suspension bridge in the state of Hawaii. It's located on the island of Maui, and it's 360 feet long, and it sits 200 feet above the land, the Aina. You can only access this bridge through like zip line adventures, so it's not generally open to the public. But thinking about the role of a bridge, right? It is to connect, to support, and to uphold. So I'm going to challenge you to take the concept and role of a bridge and apply that to you as a leader. In what ways are you connecting, supporting, and upholding values, principles, other people, your communities? So bridge building occurs when strategy, culture, and community work together to connect, support, and uphold the values of any given community. And alignment leads to impact, right? So this is the bridge building strategy outline. I'm just going to talk through these different pieces rather quickly, and then I would love to put them into practice with some scenarios with all of you. So starting with connect. That is the culture strategy component, right? You define the culture you aspire to achieve. And you start by defining the margins within your organization, right? And this is generally determined by the differences between employees within any given team or organization. So you define the margins. Identify key stakeholders who excel in building social capital. That's the trust and relationships. You know, every office has, people in it who are just like the people, right? Everybody gets along with them. They're great connectors. They're master networkers. They have this energy. And, are you that person, right? Do you aspire to be that person? And how can you use that skill set to build bridges? So that's social capital. Then you gain the commitment to bridge building from key stakeholders. And that's everyone from executive leadership at the top of the organization all the way down to your frontline leaders that are client facing and engaging with your teams at that level. Then you establish a central culture team to assess, drive, and strengthen culture. So that's the connect piece. The next piece is support. That's the community and action piece. You kind of develop your plan, your strategy on how you are going to build this particular type of culture in your organization, and then you put it into action. So you empower the central culture team to build bridges across the margins, and then you build the bridges. And this is the main gist of bridge building encapsulated in one line. You go to the margins and you work your way in. So in an economy, an economist would look at any given local economy. Who is the wealthiest family in this community and who are the poorest, right? Those are the margins of that particular community. So we start there. What are these people doing that is working well? And what do these people need to better their economic situation, right? What are the opportunities? What access? What tools do they need to do what these people are doing? And you work your way in, right? So bridge builders also train other bridge builders in building that culture of community. And then you implement safe, frequent, free-flowing lines of communication and collaboration. If you look at any given conflict or tension in the workplace, it's generally rooted in miscommunication, right? Misunderstanding, maybe even lack of communication. And so effective communication is key to keeping those open lines, free-flowing lines of communication moving, right? Always flourishing, evolving, and constantly building, strengthening relationships. Yeah. And then uphold, that's the impact and assessment piece. Continuously monitor the organizational culture and adjust as needed. So just like people, we evolve, we grow, right? Things that may have been important to us back in high school may be less important to us now that we're mid-level or senior level in our careers, right? So as we have evolved, the culture around us should evolve with us. So always being open and flexible to tweaking, making those tweaks when needed. Creating systems, processes, and metrics to track and measure your impact. And then maintaining consistency, flexibility, sustainability in employee experience programs. Now, as I've worked with organizations across the country and around the world, that is probably the biggest challenge with organizational culture is the employee programming being inconsistent, right? It's like start, stop. Well, we're going to do this for our employees, and then it just falls to the wayside, right? We have big ambitions, but when it comes down to actually implementation and sustainability, that area is lacking. So I would encourage organizations to do something relatively easy, and not just easy to stand up and implement, but easy to sustain. In addition to that, kind of shared responsibility around managing and leading those employee programs, right? That's how you develop leaders, right? Plugging in, succession planning. Who's going to lead and manage this? Is it a committee? Is it a board, right? A governance board that's going to oversee this particular program and rotate those people, giving other employees opportunities to serve in that capacity. That's the key to sustainability. And then integrate and maintain incentives, succession planning, accountability structures. So, why is this important? If this is important to an organization, they will reward employees for participating in it, or it'll be part of their performance reviews, right? That's how you create incentives for employees to follow whatever strategy you outlined for your organization. So there's that. Now, the unspoken truth behind culture shifting is how I describe that. Culture building. Why aren't culture shifts happening on their own? right? It seems so simple. Okay, you just got to be nice to people and listen to them and make sure you're communicating on a regular basis. Well, for the employees, there is fear involved, being honest, right? There may be a tension or conflict that exists between them and their direct supervisor. They may not feel comfortable expressing, right? Or being honest about. Fear of exposure, right? Of being that one person. Okay, why are you being so negative, right? When really you're just trying to offer honest feedback with the hopes to improve a process, a policy, or a program, right? Lack of trust, personality conflicts, lack of confidence. It's too hard and it's easier to opt out. Well, I could just go find another job somewhere else, right? There are a lot of people that want me. So why would I deal with this? These are all real thoughts, emotions, and experiences that employees are having in their organizations. On the leadership side, it's fear of exposure, right? If someone were to critique your team and its operations, what does that say about you as a leader, right? So as leaders, we need to be open to feedback and see that as a compliment because our teams feel safe enough, they trust me enough to receive that feedback in a positive and constructive way, right? And together we can improve. Without feedback, there's no growth, right? Can you imagine if all people ever said to you all day long, your entire career, you're doing a fantastic job. I mean, obviously there's a need for that. But if there's no constructive feedback, I mean, okay, well, apparently everything I'm doing is perfect. I'm just going to keep doing it. Meanwhile, you could be missing out on opportunities to have an even deeper impact, right? So thinking about how we offer and receive feedback. So fear of exposure, unaware there's even a problem. One thing that I've seen in organizations is the number one, which is the leader, the decision maker on any given team, is oftentimes protected in a way in which the reality, right, the culture that's happening around them, that information is not getting to the top because everyone wants to present like, oh, everything is great, right? And so that leader is missing out on all these opportunities for growth. And so they could be very well unaware that some of the members of their team are feeling a certain way, right? So how can we solve for that? Again, opening up those lines of communication, ego, denial, right? Lack of capacity and gaps in skill set. Maybe they don't know how to handle situations, or they don't believe they don't have the tools to make the changes necessary to resolve some of these concerns. And then the cost, right? So these are all concerns, valid concerns as to why certain cultures don't shift, right? So I hope to offer some solutions or ideas around solving for that. Now, I've depicted this in a graphic to kind of help conceptualize the art and concept of bridge building. So this circle represents any given organization, right? And this depicts building bridges across your organization. So within every organization, and I generally talk about these in terms of circles of trust, right? This organization is a macro circle of trust. And within that macro circle exists micro circles of trust, right? So it starts with leadership. You've got your executive leadership team. And as I noted earlier, having a central culture team is key to shifting culture. They reside right there in the middle. Other micro circles of trust are HR. You've got your frontline leaders. You've got different teams. You've got mid-level management. You've got different regions across your organization, different departments, divisions, and business lines. Now you see how that culture team sits in the center of all the other groups within the larger group. Now, if you were to take the culture team out this is when individuals and teams start to feel isolated, like they're operating in silos. People aren't necessarily communicating with one another or sharing information with one another, right? I don't know if any of you can relate to that. Well, they really have no idea what we're enduring or even experiencing over here. Well, why don't they know? Have you opened up that conversation? They're not going to know what they don't know, but offering an opportunity to share how this particular company policy is impacting your team can open up room for ideas on how we can either tweak this policy, improve the policy, or maybe even eliminate it, right? So it's important for that culture team to sit in a central location because they touch all the other groups. And the way it would function is they're having constant, frequent communication with all these other teams. And they're taking whatever they hear, whatever they're learning about those employee experiences to the attention of leadership without exposing where it's coming from, right? Going back to the fears of individuals in organizations. So this is key. So the culture team's role is to build bridges across all of these different circles. That was the best image I could find for a bridge. So. It's very simplistic, not very sophisticated. And then their role is to also build bridges across different circles as well, not just between themselves and them. So these are additional bridges being built across the organization. And you strengthen the bridges, you strengthen the business. See how that works? And all of this strength sits upon relationship building. That is the concept of bridge building. So let me just pause there. Any thoughts, reflections? Is this resonating with you? Applicable to any of your teams or organizations? I see the nodding of heads. Okay. So rethinking culture, politics, business, and ultimately education. So I want to apply these concepts to these different sectors. So rethinking the culture of politics. Like, how many of you wake up every morning and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm dying to talk about politics today? Like, that is so exciting to me. I'm going to put CNN on. I'm going to watch that all day long. And it just fuels my spirit. I mean, it makes me happy and joyful. I want to follow all the pieces of each of these campaigns, You guys are laughing, but what does that mean? What does that say about the culture of politics in our world today? Right? It's almost like, I don't know if I want to do that. So again, going to the margins and working your way in. So defining the culture of politics. So I want you to turn to your tables again and just openly define the culture of politics. When you hear politics, what immediately comes to mind? Okay, let's wrap up our conversations in the next 10 seconds. And I want us to think about how we define politics. I overheard a couple of your conversations, and my daughter was 2 years old when we moved to Washington, D.C. We literally lived about 10 blocks behind the U.S. Capitol. And so she grew up literally in the midst of the political arena here in America. And at 5 years old, I remember her asking me the question, what does politics mean? And I was like, where's Webster, But I want you all to think, how would you define politics to a 5-year-old? Any thoughts? And hey, it may be the same way you define it to a 45-year-old. Yes, Noah. I love that definition so much, and I think that would really resonate with my 5-year-old, who's now 21. But what I found myself saying to her, well, it's developing relationships and leveraging those relationships to achieve a desired outcome. right? And what I hear, doing the work that I've been doing in the corporate arena, I can't think of a better like form of conditioning or preparation than the political arena. Right? It will develop a thick skin. You really learn how to be very keen and sensitive to differences, to just building relationships, as Noah stated, people that you may not naturally been drawn to, right? So it's a very specific and I think very valuable skill set. So how did you guys define the culture of politics? Like how is it these days? It's nasty. Oh my gosh. Yeah, everyone's smiling and nodding to that. Other descriptors. Divisive. Lacks nuance. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I see what you mean. Yes. Yeah. Okay. It's become more maybe personal attacks, on candidates rather than talking about the issues that actually matter to voters. So recognizing that culture, how would you define the margins within that particular arena, the political arena? And just to give you an example, this is how I would build bridges back in Washington. I would host these, I called them Rethink Tank conversations, and I would bring in the most conservative, most progressive points of view on any given public policy issue. And we would talk through those differences and deepen our understanding of where the other side was coming from, hopefully identify some commonalities, which we always did. And I literally in real time would see some people's minds shift. And in some cases, people switch from one side to the other side on a particular issue because they were able to deepen their understanding around it by exposing themselves to different points of view. That is the value of exposure, right? The more different cultures, different people, perspectives, experiences we're exposed to, it kind of rounds out our own judgment, right? And we have our own biases that we bring to the table. So that's one way to do it. Are there other ways to define the margins within the political arena? Yes, Brenda.
If you look at politics as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting here thinking about, are there margins? Because if you take a particular topic or something that you can debate, there are margins. But politics as a whole, where are they? And what are the margins when you're looking at all of it all together?
That is a great question. And I guess as a political scientist, I tend to go straight to the ideological political spectrum. The ideological spectrum, right? You've got left, you've got right, everything in between. But I was also wondering what if the people in the middle are now in the margins, right? Instead of the margins being on the left or the right, the margins sit in the middle. And one thing I've learned in politics, the overwhelming majority of people fall somewhere in the middle. But since we operate in a two-party system, right, it's like you kind of have to choose one camp or the other. We've never seen third-party candidate emerge in a presidential election. But hey, who knows? We may see that sometime soon. If the majority of people in the margins sitting in the middle. Also recognizing people in the margins are generally the ones who decide a number of these races. Yes.
I think you're right about that, the neutral being the margin because of the divide. So then you've got people on the sides of the divide and that's the margin. Would you say that maybe the margins are issue by issue rather than the whole? To me, that's where it seems like you would be able to define the margin.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as I've worked with a number of candidates over the years, it's like, what are your top 3 issues, right? And generally what determines that for candidates is what resonates with their voters, right? So what is the number one issue to you right now? Is it education? Okay, then my stance is this, because I need to appeal to you, to the majority of voters in my district or swing districts, XYZ. So again, that also puts the values of the candidate into question, right? But of course, they are intended to represent the values of their district. So how much do your personal values coincide with the values and priorities of the people you represent? I mean, it's extremely complex. And to your point, I think absolutely yes. Depending on what issue you're talking about, those margins are going to shift, right? Your support is going to shift. We're not a monolith. None of us are. So thinking about defining those margins, then identify gaps, right? Generally, it's trust gaps, right? Where's the lack of trust? Where does that exist? Opportunity gaps, right? Who lacks opportunity and access to development, capital, communication gaps, right? Who are we not reaching? Who is not a part of this conversation? And then understanding gaps, right? You may be communicating, you may be sharing information, but they may not understand the way that you're communicating it, right? Have any of you ever read an email or, you know what I mean? You read it, but I mean, you received the communication, but then you just kind of dismissed it. You still don't really understand where this person is coming from, right? So it takes a concerted effort. So identifying those gaps, and then you build the bridges, right? Who needs to have a conversation with who in order to resolve this? And one thing that I've seen time and time again in Washington is bipartisan legislation, right? Where a leader from each party will come together, build a bridge for the sake of getting a piece of legislation passed that would have a positive impact on the majority of constituents, right? But again, a lot of conversations leading up to things like that. Okay, corporate Utah, and we'll just kind of briefly brush through this example. Define the culture of corporate Utah, right? What is it like? It's vastly different from Washington, D.C. And I describe the corporate culture here in Utah as it's like Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, you know? People are so nice, like almost to the point where it's like annoying, you know? Like I'm questioning your intentions here. Like, why are you being so nice to me? Again, you guys are smiling and laughing. So there's some truth to that, right? The culture in corporate, whereas back in Washington, you know, we thrive on debate and argument and conflict. It is a high conflict, high feedback culture. Whereas I'd say here in Utah, it's a very risk averse. It's a very conflict averse. You know, we don't want to offend anyone. And so we just won't say anything at all, right? But meanwhile, people may be suffering, you know, people may be yearning for an opportunity to voice their concerns, and no one will listen to me. And out of fear of being deemed the negative, right, person on the team, we just stay silent. So that central culture team that I was describing, those are your go-to people, right? So people that don't feel comfortable being honest in whatever team or organization that they're currently working in, they can go to somebody on that culture team. And they know that their concerns will be held confidential. They will be validated. And hey, I've learned time and time again, sometimes people just want to be listened to. You don't have to say anything, right? You just nod your head in agreement. Yes, I hear you. These are valid. And everyone's perspective and experience is absolutely valid. So starting there. So define the culture in Utah, defining the margins, right, in Utah. I mean, you can define that so many ways, right? From earnings, right? Who are the top earners, the wealthiest people here in our state? I think we all know their names. They're all over the buildings that we reside in. And then who's really struggling here? Who needs economic empowerment, right, in our communities? Identifying the gaps again, and then again, building bridges. So again, this concept can be applied in multiple sectors. The last thing, since this is an education space and I want to kind of like shake things up a little bit, we'll end on education. Now, is higher education a dying industry? Okay, and I shared with all of you, I printed out an article, an op-ed that my daughter wrote. And I want you guys to take a moment to read this and discuss it amongst your tables. And it was titled, Is Higher Education a Dying Industry? And I will say, as a parent of whatever generation my daughter's in, Gen Z, the iGen, there's so many names that we use. I feel like I'm one of those parents who actually, this was a real thought. Is higher education the right path for her? Because there are so many other options out there to building a successful career, right? And higher education is just one option, right? It was an option that worked for me and it worked for so many other people. But how many of you know children, teenagers, that path may not be for them, right? They may be a creative, they may be an artist, or an engineer, or a techie, or a social media influencer. I used to think like that was not really a real thing. And then I started realizing these people are making millions of dollars teaching people how to makeup tutorials, you know? There's value in that. And there's business opportunities there as well. So take a moment to read through this op-ed, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay, so I think many of you may be wrapping up here. Any thoughts? Any perspectives that challenged you to rethink the value of higher education? Are we making the case for the student population? This is a wise investment, right? And what is your pitch? How do you make that case? I'm assuming many of you are educators. What do you say? Yeah.
Well, I just let them know that part of what they're getting is a network when they go, and it's important for them to make sure that they're doing those things.
That's huge. And that's kind of exactly what I told my kid, right? Isn't that why everyone wants to go to Harvard or Yale or Princeton? Sure, I'm sure their education's great, but it's the network, right, that is most valuable. Have you noticed that like a lot of alumni from some of the Ivies, like they're running all the corporations and governments and things like that? And right here in the state of Utah, you know, it's UVU is the largest institution in the state. You guys are educating more Utahns than any other institution here. So there is great power and value in that. And I would congratulate all of you who work for UVU on that accomplishment, right? There's something that you're doing that's resonating with the student population. And through the relationships that they build here, the network that they take from UVU, that will open doors for them throughout their career. Other thoughts from the op-ed? Yes.
I love how, I think often when people look at younger generations, they kind of talk about the negative side of it, right? They talk about it in like, oh, they're just on their phones all the time, they don't know how to socialize or whatever. And I love how this talked about the positive side of it, and just like a reminder, and it's what I see in students, is that they really want to learn, but they want to learn in a way that's going to be useful and practical. And I think that's so valuable, because I'm an educator, some of us are educators, is focusing on, it's not about like they don't want to learn or they want the easy way out, it's about helping them learn in a way that's going to help build them and take them to their futures.
Absolutely. Wholeheartedly agree with that. That's what I'm hearing from the iGeners, right? And they've never experienced a world without the internet. And in fact, sometimes I pose that to them. Okay, imagine life without the internet. And it's just like devastation. I mean, what? No, that's not even life, you know? But I remember like the first email account, I think it was a Hotmail account that I had. And I received an email and I was just so confused as to like, where did this come from? And how do I respond to it? I mean, literally, I remember the time in the world when there was no internet. So for them to have technology at their fingertips, right? Their learning process is vastly different from ours, from my generation, and it's extremely accelerated. So if they can get from A to B in 2 steps instead of 12, I want that path too, right? Brenda.
Well, and here's a good example of that. Last semester I was in an English class with my granddaughter here at UVU.
Nice.
Yeah, and it would take her 4 hours to write a paper, and me 4 days to write a paper, and we got the same grade. Not fair, but, I'm glad that she's doing well.
Okay, did AI play a role in that? I have mixed feelings about AI. I'm like, are we dumbing down ourselves? At what point are we designing humans out of the human experience? So as technology continues to excel and grow, may we ask ourselves those questions? Yes, over here.
What I read in this is just the need to redefine education, and perhaps also, intelligence has been redefined, to your point, like you just said. We recognize there's new ways to access information, new ways to generate information, and with that prevalence of information, there are bits of knowledge, that come. And one of those, I think, is understanding that there are neurological differences we've previously viewed as disabilities that require new methods of teaching. It is a legitimate need to be taught to read differently than we used to do. Because one
Absolutely.
people have dyslexia, and they're not dumb. They're brilliant. They're
Yeah.
as intelligent as can be. But to have those communication pieces in education where that can be harnessed and displayed is something that I think this article speaks to. Let us use our creativity. Let us do things outside of the tight boundaries that were set in previous years. Break through that groupthink
Yep.
and stop trying to be like a big fish in a little pond because the ocean is open wide to us at this point. So let us swim. So using those pieces of technology to enhance the creativity and some of those things that we used to pride ourselves on when we didn't have the internet, hammering out the little details, those can be taken care of because we're looking at this now. So just using all of those things to facilitate and getting comfortable with that is what I hear.
Yes, yeah. I couldn't agree more. And as we evolve as individuals, as a community, right, the culture of education should evolve as well. The tools that we're using, the strategies, the practices, right, should evolve along with those needs as they shift over time. Okay, loving all the conversation here. So valuable lesson learned in culture and community impact work that I have done, and speaks to women in particular. There's value in personally experiencing, witnessing, or knowingly or unknowingly supporting discriminatory policies, practices, or behavior. And that is people who develop the ability to acknowledge, recognize, and reconcile these truths also develop a deeper awareness, understanding, and propensity to offer empathy, compassion, and grace when needed, right? When an individual knows what it feels like to be treated unfairly, they step into future circumstances and experiences with a deeper sense of empathy, compassion, and grace for others because we know what that feels like, right? And this is not exclusive to women. This applies to all humans. These leadership traits sit at the heart of bridge building. And that is the power that we each have. Progress relies on our propensity to offer grace when needed, however, not at the expense of our own self-preservation. And this is something I've seen women carry over and over again, time and time again, not just in the workplace, but in our personal lives as well, carrying other people's burdens, right? We have to protect self, and prioritizing self-care, self-love, all those self things is not selfish. It's smart, right? It's leadership, right? It's making sure that we are at our best so that we can perform at our best. Now, the opportunity for women, we are natural bridge builders, right? We know how to connect. We know how to connect dots. And we know how to connect, support, and uphold people, cultures, and communities. The The opportunity for women is through bridge building, we position ourselves to challenge people to rethink how and what they think. And that which makes you different is what makes you valuable. Now, how can I help? Rethink International, this is the work that I do. It's culture, community, impact work. You should all have my information at this point to learn more about how I could support you individually or your organizations. A couple of events I just wanted to put on your radar. So October 17th, and thank you, Brenda. She's supporting me in promoting, and also is creating. She's also a small business owner, and the gifts for our speakers are coming directly from Brenda. They're really amazing. Rethink Power event. It'll be October 17th at Salt Lake Kiln, 5:30 to 8:30, and it's going to be packed with just powerful women, powerful leaders from our community. These are the 7 powerful leaders that will be featured there, sharing their Rethink Power stories, and teaching us how to navigate power structures, how to leverage our power within to empower others. And the focus is ancestry, identity, purpose. So learning how to draw upon the power of our ancestors, tap into the power of our identity, and step into the power of living out our purpose. Now, I created a discount code for all of you UVU folks, so you can get 25% off. It's only $25 to register, but it's Rethink Power UVU. So remember that. And then another opportunity for women is Rethink Power Speaking Workshop that Robin Healing, I understand that she came and spoke to all of you here before. She's a dear friend and sister of mine, will be co-leading a workshop on power speaking. So if you're interested in developing that skill, that will be October 25th at Kiln Salt Lake as well. Also, these flyers on the back of your handout that you had today. And lastly, I hope that we can stay connected. Find me on LinkedIn. This is my profile page. You've got my personal information here. And I wanted to end with one of my favorite quotes that I share with Utah women. And that is, Utah women are the most valuable untapped resource in America. And I've worked with women around the world. Once our full potential and power is released, watch out, world. Game over. And that is what each of us are doing here right in this room. And I am here to support you along your journey. With that, I want to thank you all for your time, your attention, for getting up early. I can't think of a better way for me to start my day than in conversation with all of you. It has been an honor to spend this time with you, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
I'd very much like to thank Sui Lang. That was just fascinating. And I think you met your goal of having us think in new ways. So I think we have a lot to ponder and consider as we move forward and work with people in our organizations and build teams. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you at our next gathering, and perhaps at Sui Lang's gatherings as well. Thank you.